miniseries format? What were the specific challenges that you faced?
I mean, first off, I think it was actually a good format because I think it would have been much tougher to try and do a 2-hour movie. Because of the book's not long, but it is epic and it covers a huge period of time. And it felt it would have been difficult to create that sense of so much time on the Earth passing and our characters evolving. So the miniseries was actually a blessing as a format. Originally it was conceived as a 2-parter, and then Syfy wanted it to be 3 nights. So the challenge was to find what to put in the second night, really, because the first night really presented itself as the opening and the world getting to grips with these benevolent alien overlords, and then the third part was very, very clearly the end game of the story, but the second part was this sort of space. And so when I went through the book again, I found this sort of very innocuous paragraph that said, and then the Overlords persuaded Earth to mankind to dispense with religion. And that was kind of it. That was it. That was Arthur C. Clarke. And then they dispensed with religion. And I thought, well, that's a movie in itself, getting a planet to give up its religious beliefs. So that became the crux of the second part. And from that, we created a new character that's not in the book, that played by Yael Stone, who represented religious belief. And it's through her eyes a lot, we sort of tell that story.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I mean, it's the one that I'm most nervous about because it's the one that's the most off book. So it's the one that's open to people are going to say, well, why is he doing that? Why are you sort of adding to what Arthur C. Clarke did already so brilliantly? But I think when you see it, I hope that it will feel very organic to the story, very part of what he was writing about.
When you're writing a story where you get to visualize a future and you get to basically build the aesthetic from what was on the page and then how you interpret it, how, we're so used to seeing dystopian and the world broken apart. How did you kind of want to visualize and let the audience see what a kind of utopian future would look like?
It was very hard to get right, and it was a big aesthetic conversation with myself, with Nick, with the designer, Phil Ivey, and the whole team, and with the studio and the network about how we did it. I mean, in the end, we felt that it was very important to make a visual impression. I mean, that's why we have the utopians all wearing roughly the same kind of clothes and the same kind of colour palette, which is very beige and white. Now, that kind of seems obvious in some ways, but actually you need to do it because when you see it on screen, it hits you as a statement, and you really have to make a statement. But what we also came up with was a sort of philosophy for why they're wearing what they're wearing. So it's not as though you have to drink the Kool-Aid and you have to get up in the morning and suddenly the Overlords have laid out a new wardrobe for you. It's just that over time, under their watchful gaze, we've done away with sweatshops. There are no more sweatshops in India. We talk about this in the show. So our clothing, whatever you're wearing now, you continue wearing until it runs out, and then the stuff that's left is just stuff that's there to be fairly utilitarian and fairly basic. People no longer have social media, so there's no need to dress to impress. There's no need to dress. You just dress for comfort. And it just felt organic to us. It felt organic that people would start to wear simpler clothes because they were no longer insecure about who they were. So that was kind of how we worked the aesthetic through. And then we came up with a few, cool visual ideas, such as freeway overpasses that are now turned into golf courses. So, things like that. And you just see simple little images of families together, garages turned into greenhouses. Just because obviously we're working on a budget as well, so we can't take you on a JJ would have us sweeping through these amazing cities, and he'd have all that money. So we had to kind of find little moments, just little images and ideas that made you feel that we were in a utopia. But also, what I was very careful of was being ironic, not losing the irony. So we have interesting music choices. We play songs over montage sequences of utopia that are kind of deliberately undermining it slightly, making you smile. I don't want the audience to feel like we drank the Kool-Aid too. So. Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about how you've written the characters compared to how they're portrayed in the book?
Well, the characters are... I've changed a few things because as brilliant as the book is, it was written in a time when really the stars of science fiction stories always were scientists, leading politicians. It wasn't unusual to nowadays if you make the head of the United Nations your main character, you've got to have an angle.
Yeah.
You can't just say, well, of course he's the head of the United Nations, so he's beyond reproach. Now we live in a more cynical age, and we're more aware now of what's going on. So Ricky Stormgren in the book is the head of the United Nations. Well, I kind of wanted to go. I took my cue from Close Encounters really, and said, do you know what? I'm more interested in the ordinary guy who gets put into the middle of this rather than the politician. And I liked also the other thing is I referenced every reference I have between Corellin and humanity is sort of inspired by God's relationship with prophets in the Old Testament. God never very rare. I mean, I know there was a King David, but he very rarely chooses kings. He's a king maker, not a. He doesn't go and pick you. He picks the farm boy, the shepherd boy, the woman by the well. They're the people who are singled out for special treatment. And so that's what we did with the story. I wanted Corellin to pick a farmer and say, I like you, you're clever. And of course the first thing the farmer says is, no, you need the president, or you need the Dalai Lama. And Corellin says, yeah, but they come with baggage. You don't. No preconceptions about you. And then when you get into that kind of debate of, well, how special is he? Is he the most special man on the planet? And you say, well, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. God chose him. It's not about proving yourself. It doesn't matter. God chose him. So he must see something in him that we don't see. So that was kind of how I approached Ricky. And then, the characters, Milo Rodricks, who was Jan Rodricks in the book, is, I think, very true to the character in the book. He's a scientist, but he's a dreamer, and he's an idealist, and has this insatiable curiosity to find out where they come from and what they have in store for us. And I think that's very much borne out in the book. But if you the book isn't really it's a book of ideas. I mean, the characters are ciphers for ideas. So you have to kind of flesh them out, find a new sort of approach for them, really, to make them accessible to an audience.
Are you able to stay with it? Because obviously, you're making a TV show, it translates to the medium, and some people may be more interested in knowing what they look like the reveal in the book, what they look like after the 50 years. And for you, are you able to keep it, obviously these really metaphorical, pertinent topics that Clarke talked about in the DNA and as the engine motivator for what you're doing?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, we haven't taken out any of the philosophy. We've had to curtail some of it, and we've had to shorten it, and we don't go into as much detail as he went into in the book, but we absolutely have it all in there. Yeah, it's very important.
Yeah.
I mean, at times, particularly in the first episode, it's a debate between Ricky and Corellin in that spaceship, and it's having the courage as program makers to say, let's not cut away from this. Let's hear what they're saying. Let's just have a guy in a room talking to an alien we can't see at the moment. And that's we've tried to be brave and take that on.
What kind of, it sounds like there's almost like messages being put in from current times, even though the book was written a while ago, about, like you said, the freeway overpasses being turned into grass and things like that, of how maybe we can improve the world. Was that something that you purposely did to kind of look at the world, and what kind of messages are you putting in it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's impossible to make utopia appealing, actually, because we don't want it. So New Athens, if you know the book, New Athens is very important because New Athens represents living life, warts and all, the way we live it. And I don't ever think people are going to look at the show and say, oh wow, wouldn't it be lovely if we could all wear white Gap clothes and cycle everywhere and everything's turfed over. So we don't even try to. We just say, look, this is what humanity has. It has peace, but at the cost of identity and at the cost of interesting aspects to your life. But I don't think all the themes that Clarke wrote about are still relevant. I mean, all the fears that he had of the Cold War. Well, we're back into a Cold War. We're back into an age of austerity. The 50s was an age of austerity. Well, now we're in an age of austerity. Everyone was worried about the Nazis coming back. We're worried about ISIS. Nothing's changed. So I had no qualms about updating the novel because it was all the themes were exactly the same.
Fantastic.
Can you talk about your cast, which seems to be pretty incredible?
I know, no, they're a great cast, amazing cast. Well, I mean, we were just very lucky, I think. I mean, a lot of people are attracted to the book, and knew the book. So I think they were curious about being part of it. So we got Yael, and she's amazing, and she really is extraordinary in her role. And Mike Vogel was such a thoughtful lead actor. I mean, he, to the point where, sometimes I just wanted to go to bed and he'd be like, no, let's talk more about it. But he would really sit down and, really sit down with the script and the book, and we would have debates long into the night about what it meant, and that's a real blessing as a filmmaker if you have a cast that aren't just turning up and doing it. They're just there, they're engaged with the material and provoked by it. And sometimes provoked in a kind of, sometimes it'd be like, what, really? We've got to do this? Are you sure? I don't think this would, we would resist them if they did this to us. We would fight against them. And then but that's good too. Then you have a debate about why you're not resisting.
This might be a network thing, but do you think that the story could lend itself to, in another year, creating another mini-series and going kind of in another direction?
Have you read the book?
I haven't read the book.
If you read the book, you'll see that it's pretty unlikely that we could do that.